Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hi, Ren. Nice to meet you as well. Thank you so much for being willing to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. Thanks for the invitation and space.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
Stephanie.
Hey,
Hi, Zoe.
hey.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited about this conversation. I hope that we get all the people who signed up, and I think it's just going to be a great way to empower, and I can't wait to share your insights more broadly when we have our recording as well. I
So
am
who are the recordings available to? Is that just for like internal your students, or does it go out on a public channel or?
Well, we have a YouTube channel, but it's not a public channel, and so we haven't quite figured out how to do distribution. It's available in our leadership learning community Canvas hub, so people can access them there, and we also send them out to the folks who registered but didn't attend. And so that gives them an opportunity. And we've talked about, and I haven't gotten back with Michelle and Ron about having like doing replays and maybe offering them on LinkedIn or on Facebook as replays that people can access.
Oh, I wish I had known how to do that when I've zoomed so many people, including both Ren and Michael, multiple times into my classes, and I wish I could have known how to save those and make them available on Canvas for other people teaching the classes.
What they end up doing is downloading the file from Zoom and then putting it into a YouTube video, because otherwise we lose them off of Zoom after a certain amount of time.
Right. Yeah.
And they also they put like for the Courageous Leadership Colloquium, they put covers on them too, or like open screens and things, so they look a little bit more pro, which is nice. Now I need to take a minute to find the opportunity for you all to share your screens. Okay, so it says that
Are
all
you
parts.
going to share your screen, Ren?
I don't think I will be. I'm not planning on it. I wasn't sure if that was an option or not, so I just planned not to, and that's totally fine. I'm excited to just talk and have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm not going to use any slides either.
Okay, well then we won't have to worry about it.
I think Michael's going to be able to join us right at the minute we start because he's
Okay.
in a meeting up until the last second, typically, as is typical.
It sounds like the work you all are doing is just so just engaging and just lots and lots of things going on, and minute to minute I bet it probably changes too.
Two of
Yeah,
the busiest
absolutely.
people that I know, yeah.
So
It's
I would like that to be.
remarkable that we have you both on Zoom at the same time. I can't believe it. It's very exciting.
Yeah, if nothing else, just so excited to have the conversation and get to see both of you at the same time. Exactly. But I will always have time for conversations like this. It's just what I care about and what I'm passionate about. And so very here for it. Yeah.
So Ren and Michael were you at Prescott at the same time?
Not at the same time. Michael was a few years before me. But we both had Zoe as a professor. And then I went and did an internship with Michael when I was in college, and he had graduated and was doing labor organizing in New York. So all very interconnected.
Oh my gosh. It seems like everyone at Prescott is connected to everyone else and continues to do the work. I was able to go to Prescott for the first time ever a couple weeks ago and got to meet a bunch of faculty and just to have lots of really cool conversations about how everyone is doing such important work. Even the folks who have retired and have stepped away from the institution in doing the day-to-day work, they're still so engaged in the community and in the world. It's fantastic. I love it.
And so Ren Kelly came to Kenya with me this summer,
Oh, awesome.
and Kelly, both Ren and Michael have also been to Kenya as students.
It's amazing work that they're doing, and I'm super concerned though. I sent Mary a note the other day watching Facebook and what's going on the Mara, and if there are things those of us who have been there, if there are things that we can do on this, from where we are to help.
Yeah, they've got a big fight against Marriott right now going on. I'm sure there's plenty of things we can do.
Well, definitely not stay at Marriott.
Definitely. I don't understand the whole problem. I've been trying to, Mary and I've been playing email tag with each other and phone tag, but I think they're building in ways that I know that are obstructing the wildebeest migration, but I think there also might be connected to fires that are happening. It sounds, but I heard, the last I heard, May said that he was really encouraged there. Looks good for their lawsuit. They've got a big lawsuit against Marriott, so.
Oh, good. They're being heard. That's fantastic. It's been super interesting to try to learn. And I actually was pulling up maps and looking at the Mara and trying to figure out where it was relative to where we were. And it's such important work. It's so good that they're doing it.
Absolutely.
Mary was just in Tucson not too long ago doing book talks about her book and really connecting like what's happening. And May wasn't able to make it, unfortunately. But yeah, just making the connections between like what's happening here in the borderlands with what's happening in Moss Island. And yeah, I'm just really excited about that book project too. And that feels like a way into connecting more people with the work too.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this like series of speakers or webinars?
We started about a year and a half ago because we have one of our initiatives is to get off the hill at Olivet. We are our institutions on a little hill full of beautiful oak trees, but one of the strategic plan goals is to get off the hill. And so just started to ask people, hey, do you want to talk about how your work uses courage? And so lots of folks have stepped up. We've had everyone from nurses in geriatric wards to leadership consultants to public speaking coaches, and just lots of really cool conversations about where courage lives and where courage is needed. And last year I did an experiment because one of the things that we wanted to have in our master's program was a gathering of all of the students to talk about courageous leadership and build those skills, but to bring everyone together physically wasn't going to happen. So I said, well, let's do a colloquium. And so with it in a month, we put together a colloquium and had 13 speakers about courageous leadership. And we had like 200 people show up to this virtual colloquium. So we're doing it again this September. It's going to be 2 days and just lots of different topics around courage. And so if you know anyone who has a cool story or a movement or a project that they're working on that requires courage, you've got my email address. Definitely, reach out. Or if you would like to come back and talk, it's in September. That would be awesome.
Beautiful. I love that project. And yeah, I'll be thinking of people to send your way.
Awesome.
Definitely a moment where lots of courage is required.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'm looking at our clock and we are at 12:59, depending on what time zone one is in.
I think we're in 3 different time zones here, and then it looks like somebody named, are these Nathan and Jeff?
We have our audience members. Hi there, welcome. Okay, we are going to get started. Welcome everyone to Boldly Lead, an opportunity to learn about how courage lives and works and operates in all kinds of different contexts around the world. Today we're going to be focusing on courageously leading change in communities. We have a team of 3 who are going to be talking with us. about their work as community organizers. We have with us Dr. Zoe Hammer. She's going to facilitate the conversation. And she is a geographer and scholar of social science, sociology, and anthropology. Her work focuses on empowering social justice activists wherever they are, whether they are in universities or in communities, or people just want to create change, and she meets them on the street. She empowers them to establish relationships with base building organizations across movements, particularly focusing on geopolitical borders around the world, in between the US and Mexico, in Kenya, and also in the US in a variety of different areas. She is committed to fostering inclusive environments and driving impactful change through collaborative leadership. We also have with us, or will have with us, Michael Belt. I was told he's going to jump in as soon as he gets out of his previous engagements. He's an international organizer with the UAW, which I recently learned no longer is just the United Auto Workers. It is the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, where he helps to lead the empowerment of these workers to participate meaningfully in making decisions affecting their welfare and that of the communities in which they live. And we have with us also Ren Manning, who is the executive director of Border Links, where people collectively learn, teach, reflect, share resources, and organize for justice in the borderlands. And so these three folks have learned and worked together at Prescott College. Around their common bond is Prescott College. Since then, they've gone out into the world and have empowered folks to create positive change and create a more just world in the communities where they live. Thank you to all of you for joining us. I should have introduced myself. I'm Kelly Corey. I'm the director of the Master of Arts and Leadership program and MBA program at the University of Olivet. And I will be jumping back in at the end to share with you some other opportunities to learn how to boldly lead. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us. I just introduced you. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the three of you. Thank you so much for taking time out of the important work that you do to talk with us and help us learn and grow.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's really wonderful to be here with Dr. Corey. And I so appreciate the invitation to participate in this important series. Also, it's really great to be here with members of the Olivet community who are, showing up for us live today. It's great to have you here. And then it's especially wonderful to be here with Ren and Michael, who are, in addition to both being former students of mine, are also dear friends and colleagues. And actually, two of the very first people that I call or text or talk to when I have any questions about organizing theory or practice. So both of them are two of the very busiest organizers that I know. So having two of them for 1 hour at the same time is a little bit of a miracle. I'm going to talk less about my work because I actually have far less organizing experience than the two of them at this point, and be more the interviewer and interview the two of them because they're both currently leading organizations, leaders in important movement-based, social movement-based organizations, and do a lot of the work that I'm hoping that we'll be able to dig into in this interview. So Kelly already did a wonderful job of introducing both of them. I just want to add a couple things. So starting with Michael, who's an international organizer with the UAW, and has personally organized over 10,000 workers, and has led campaigns, many campaigns in higher education, organizing grad student workers and postdocs and faculty into unions across the higher ed sector, which I think is one of the fastest growing sectors in the labor movement. And then most recently led a really important historic winning campaign in Chattanooga, organizing Volkswagen auto workers. Michael's work has been so innovative and so important. And I just wanted to throw out there that way back when Michael was an undergraduate student, for his senior project, he put together a youth conference and brought youth organizers, raised the money, and brought groups of youth organizers and activists from all across the state of Arizona, from as far north as the Navajo Nation, a young group of students out of your backpack media who were making their own documentaries about social justice issues in the Navajo Nation, all the way down to the southern borderlands with some 7th and 8th grade students who are doing organizing around US-Mexico border militarization in their communities. And so, as you can see, Michael has been courageously leading for a very long time. Although, and then Ren, who is the co-executive director of a nonprofit organization called Borderlinks that I have a long-standing relationship with going way back. But just under Ren's leadership, Borderlinks has expanded. It used to be mostly a popular education organization that leads delegations from many different kinds of communities along the US borderlands to give people a much more sophisticated understanding of border issues, and also the impacts of immigration policy, of US immigration policy on communities. Under Ren's leadership, Borderlinks has really expanded its mission in some very meaningful ways and started directly participating in social justice organizing, it's community organizing in many different ways. And then I'll also throw in there that as an undergraduate student, not as many years ago, but still, a few years ago, Ren's senior project developed, got approved, implemented, and fully funded a full ride scholarship for undocumented students at Prescott College, where we all used to be. So again, both Ren and Michael taking on the kinds of issues that do require a lot of courage, and increasingly so in the US. All right, so what was I going to say? So what I really want to focus on today is a concept called leadership development, that it has a very specific meaning within social movement contexts. And I really like to, and it's perhaps, leadership development is perhaps the most essential element of building movements that can actually have the power to push for social change and win. So it's a very important concept and skill, and I just these two have a lot of experience with it in two different kinds of organizing context: labor organizing and community organizing. So I thought that they would be perfect people to talk about this. So I just have a series of questions I want to ask both of you, and maybe I'll start with Ren. I'd love to have you just describe Borderlinks, talk about its purpose and goals. How is it structured? I believe it's a nonprofit, but what does that mean? And then maybe you could talk to us about the decision-making process within the organization and some of your critical successes.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for this opportunity to share about our work. So as was mentioned, I'm one of the co-directors of Borderlinks, and we have a shared leadership model. So instead of just one executive director, it's 2 directors, and then more that I'll go into in a little bit. But Borderlinks has been around for 37 years, and we've been building strong strategic social movements for migrant justice in that time through using education to move people into action for migrant justice. So we're a community-based organization where people collectively learn, teach, reflect, share resources, and organize for justice in the borderlands. We use a popular education model that's really rooted in place in the borderlands, and also rooted in the expertise that comes from lived experience of migrants. And we are deeply collaborative. So Borderlinks, what we're able to do wouldn't be possible without working with over 40 plus different community organizations with whom we're inspiring and igniting action to transform unjust border and immigration laws and conditions. So what that means is our goal, like I said, is to move people into meaningful action for migrant justice, and really seeing our role within larger movements for collective liberation, for social transformation. And the day-to-day, we're facilitating immersive programs where people do travel from all over the United States, or has been beyond as well, to stay with us in Tucson for 1 to 14 days, where we facilitate workshops, talks with community partners, action planning, reflection, day trips. So people are having an embodied experience of the borderlands, doing workshops in person and virtual, having in-person events that are bringing together local organizers with scholars. Silky Shaw and John Washington released books, and we had a book talk where they were in conversation with other organizers on the ground. So really a lot of like cross and connective type conversations, and also just using our space as a resource. A lot of local organizations use our building to hold meetings. We host groups in our dorms. We are partnering with a lot of community organizations and doing coalition work. Right now, what that looks like is deportation defense work and rapid response. And in terms of mobilizing people to have an active presence when ICE or other law enforcement is present. So trying to do that harm reduction of stopping deportations as much as we can. And we are structured as a nonprofit, which as an educational org means in this moment that a lot of education is being suppressed in institutions. We have more space to be talking about the issues with courage, without hesitation that we need to be. And also it means there's some other like threat of nonprofit status being taken away based on having a stance of like solidarity with Palestine, or just purely doing migrant justice organizing, which is the heart of what we do. So existing in that kind of interesting place in terms of the structure of the organization. And we have a shared leadership model. Two things within that are that it's consent-based, so a sort of breakdown of decision-making that we do in group spaces. I can go more into that later too. And then our zones of engagement, which really breaks down all the major decisions within the organization and allows people space to step up into different roles of leadership within those areas that's not lined up with just their job description of being like one of the directors or program organizer, but has more to do with either being part of the decision making of it, or being brought in for discussion in other ways. You asked a lot of questions at once. I want to briefly touch on successes too. So been talking about the topic of this podcast with my coworkers, and some of the things that were really raised from folks yesterday was thinking about the way that people who participate in our programs become really invested in being part of movements and having like a role in the future. So having like this transformative experience that's really grounded in lived experiences here, and then understanding what their own role is and their own like agency to be able to participate in the communities that they're part of. And we work with over 600 people a year. So what that means is over like 20,000 people in the lifetime of the organization who, are doing that. Like there's that immediate sort of change we might see, but there's also like all of these years of people going out and having complete career changes, or changing the relationships with how they talk to their families, or engaging in deportation defense work, building campaigns, you name it. So there's so much more beyond what we see in this tiny moment that we get to participate in. And we have so many staff that have gone through a leadership like process. So my co-director, Tanya, has worked in basically every position in this organization, like intern, kitchen, operations, program organizer, you name it. And now she's a co-director. So I think that's like a really powerful story of leadership development over the course of this organization. We have other staff who came in as delegates, participants in our programming, became interns, then staff, or community partners who used to actually present to groups about their organizing, who are now also staff. So a lot of ways that it's embedded in our organization. I'll pass it to you, Michael.
Michael, you want me to repeat the question?
How did you know, Zoe?
You do not? Okay.
No, I would love you to. Yeah,
Oh,
thank
you
you.
do? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Ren. And Ren also began talking about the process of leadership development. So we'll dig more into that in our next question. But
Yeah.
first question is to describe the UAW. What are the general terms, the purpose and goals of what are the UAW's goals? And then how are you structured? You know, how is a union structured?
Yeah.
How's that different from a nonprofit? What does the decision-making process look like at the UAW? Very different, I think, from Borderlinks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then what have been some of the critical successes?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I apologize for being a little bit late. Really excited to be here. I think that this is like a really important conversation for folks that do movement work. And I think it's amazing that this conversation applies to all sorts of different areas across movement work. Like the work that Ren and I do, substantively, I would argue it is different in some ways and very similar in other ways. But the concept of leadership development crosses both sectors. And so I think that we think about this question all the time. So for folks who don't know, unions, or the way that unions exist in the United States largely, are predominantly organizations that exist at specific employers. So they're organizations that represent the employees at one employer for the purposes of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is like where you go to get a job. When you get a job, you negotiate your work, your benefits, et cetera, as an individual, right, with your potential employer. Unions do that collectively because the theory of change is that you have more power when you band together with your coworkers to then be able to have an equal seat at the table with management over negotiating over your working conditions. So, and there's a lot of new exciting union movement stuff that's outside of that, where you have like gig workers or people who work in precarious positions, et cetera. But the purposes of my job, we work in higher education, predominantly grad students, postdocs, adjuncts, contingent faculty, et cetera, and then also in manufacturing. Currently, last couple of years, I've been working in manufacturing, and manufacturing in the United States, still tons of manufacturing here. And you know, these are large scale employers. So at, like we mentioned, Volkswagen as a critical success. Volkswagen has a little bit over 4,000 employees at one workplace. And so, so the union, what I do as an organizer is help people who are not part of the union form a brand new union to, you know, bring their coworkers on board in the face of a lot of intense opposition from their employer, right? Employers, and usually people think that this is about money. When we ask workers why they want to form unions, wages is usually really close to the bottom of the list. Usually at the top, it's about protection against discrimination, harassment, and fair treatment at work. People want to be treated with respect when they go to their job, right? And so how we're structured is a very, what compared to Borderlinks, very traditional decision-making, majority-based decision-making, very democratic structure. So the structure of the organization is made up of the workers at the location though, right? So like if you form a new union at a plant, the leadership of that union comes from the base. So the people who run the organization, in the exact same way that Ren was articulating, that, you know, people come from the base who are impacted folks, then get trained up, and then, you know, in an ideal world, become staff members, become leaders in those organizations. We have the same fundamental principle about how we think about who the organization should be run by. The union is for the workers, by the workers. So as a staff organizer, a huge part of my job is to help those folks go through that process and participate. And we do think that, you know, while I totally agree that I think consensus is a really good ideal to shoot for the structure of the organization, we are bound by our bylaws to have a majority rules decision-making practice that allows people to run for political office. Oh, and then just huge part of that is we're funded by dues. And so everybody who's in the union, in theory, in specific circumstances, pays dues. So we're funded from everybody chips in, and those resources control the organization. So that's an important part as well.
Thank you so much, Michael. For my next question, I would like to hear both of you dig in a little further to explain the practices, the theory and practice of leadership development. So first, it would be great to just have a basic definition of leadership development. What is it? And then I'd love to hear about how you identify leaders and what kinds of things you do to develop them and how you know when it's working. So maybe we'll start this time and start with Michael.
Love this question. So this is my favorite question as a professional organizer of 14 years. I spend a lot of time thinking about all day long, thinking about how do we develop leaders? So first off, let's start with just like, what is a leader? And you could pontificate about this forever. Really simple answer is a leader is somebody that has followers, right? A leader is somebody who moves other people to do stuff. Within the union world, right, we go to a workplace and we're looking for who are what we refer to as organic leaders, the people who already move their coworkers at work. So you can think about this in like your classes, right? If you're a student, who are the people that you look up to in your class, right? And most of the time, and not to say anything bad about anybody, but it's not the people who don't show up to class. It's not the people who are bad at doing classwork. It's not the people who are obstinate towards management or towards your professor. It's usually the people who are good students, who ask good questions, who help their fellow co-students. It's the same thing in a plant or in a factory setting, right? Leaders are usually people who are helpful, are people look up to for whatever reasons. Not always are those people pro-union, right? So that's really a huge part of it. Leadership development is the process that someone goes to acquire and develop the skills necessary to lead people in an effective manner, right? And I would argue one of the reasons why I love the work that I do is because workers have an opportunity to become a leader in the union, in the labor movement, in a different way than they ever do in the rest of their lives, right? The other spaces that people really have access to this outside of their work life are very limited. In their church community, in their family community, right? Spiritual, religious scenes. Other than that, it's really, really limited. And so when people have the ability to step into a new role in a new way, it's an entirely new process of self-development as well. And not only like learning hard skills of how do you facilitate a meeting, how do you have an effective conversation with your coworker where you're effectively addressing questions, concerns, moving them from one place to another place. So I'd argue that leadership development is the process that movement workers or like staff organizers, professional organizers help to develop somebody who comes from the base, right? And by base, I mean the thing that we're trying to address. So in my case, it's workers at an employer to becoming a leader in the labor movement, right? Ideally with the goal of helping their coworkers win a union, but also to run the organization, because leadership development fundamentally increases the scale of what we're able to accomplish. The more leaders that we develop, the more leaders that they develop, and then the more scale that we can accomplish within the labor movement. And I think those were the questions, but let me know if I missed anything.
No, that was awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. So Ren, just to repeat the question, how do you at Borderlinks define leadership development? And then within that, how do you identify leaders? What do you do to develop them? And how can you tell when it's working?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that very clear definition. I really appreciate it. And I would just add a couple dynamics to that I see. One being the idea of leadership as responsibility that really is like one place rooted in like Zapatista movement and definition. For anyone who's unfamiliar, in autonomous indigenous peoples in South Mexico who have really fought for land rights and autonomy, especially known for the 1994 uprising. And this accountability comes from like governing by obeying, as they say. So accountability to the people, to the movements in which we're a part, and to each other. And part of that is the role in education in leadership development as well, in that critical consciousness about understanding the root causes of the issues that we're fighting against and the systems so that we can more effectively address that. So there's that knowledge base, and then there's the education of social movements and how we're rooted in past and current organizing in a way that people can then better understand themselves as agents of change, and that change is possible. So like doing that, the vision work also of like believing that it's possible, believing that I have agency and actually can make change, and conditions in my own life and in my community can change. And so those are a couple places where we led a leadership development course last year that did have some of those hard skills that Michael was talking about, how to plan and facilitate organizing meetings, telling your story, like the power of personal transformation and moving people through that, the elements of popular education, so really understanding education not as neutral, that students and teachers are, you know, breaking down, changing that power dynamic that we're learning through dialogue, the curriculum development pieces, and that included like planning and facilitating workshops as well. So that was built into the leadership development courses so that people are also able to be identifying issues in their community, skills and knowledge they have to offer to that, and being able to shape learning opportunities for other people in their community to continue to do that, like community-based learning. And in terms of in the organization, in our zones of engagement structure, there's four zones. So number one is like the person leading the decision making, making sure the meeting happens, that needs to, you know, wrangling all the cats, herding all the cats together, right? Two is like participating in discussion and being part of that decision making. Three is like, I want an update about this. And four is like, I'll find out whenever I find out about this. And we've broken down every area of decision making in the organization, and people had the opportunity to self-select into areas they were interested in. And then there's some negotiating around like how that fits with other job responsibilities. But that this, and through that, learning that there's some expectations that if you're on the core, that you're in at least a few areas of being a one or two. So everyone's participating in more of that leadership of decision making. And this was really inspired by Transqueer Pueblo, a migrant justice org in Phoenix, and helped shaped by Sharifa Rowe and Melia Dune as well. But it was really born from like a need that staff had for standing up for what they deserved. And it started like several years before my time, and we've just continued to develop it. But some of the beautiful things I've like seen through that is the way in which there's also trust that's built. So yeah, it's not a fully consensus model where we're not all needing to make decisions all together, but being able to, yeah, trust smaller groups of ourselves to make certain decisions, and then know when it is time to bring things to everybody in order to move forward.
That's such an amazing model. I just very inspired by that model of people self-selecting, choosing to step up or be in the middle, or not needing to participate in this particular kind of decision making. I think it's really interesting. Thank you so much, Ren. For our final question, before I open up and see if there's some Q&A from the audience, I wanted to ask both of you about your experiences with leadership development. Maybe have you tell us a story or two about your experiences developing leaders, maybe successes or failures, either one. A lot of times we learn more from failures than successes. And I actually would start with a story from many, many years ago from my own experience. And I like to share this story because it's when I really learned, I think I turned a corner in my understanding of what leadership development is. And I was working at an organization that no longer exists called the Border Action Network. That was a base building organization. We had about 750 family members, family memberships, which were families who are members of the organization, dues-paying members of the organization, who are from mixed status families. So the families had one or more members that were undocumented. And so that made which makes the whole family vulnerable, of course. And so it had 4 members who came in and they were upset because one of them had been pulled, and 3 of them were monolingual Spanish speakers. One of them was bilingual English Spanish. And they had a local police officer in Tucson pull one of them over and quite illegally just confiscate their car. And so they were upset and they didn't know what to do. And my first response, I was a volunteer there. I was sitting in the office and I said, oh, I'm going to call up Jesus, a board member who's a lawyer. I was like, let's get a lawyer on this. That's illegal. And then the organizer was like, no, that's not what we're doing. And he immediately had a meeting with the 4 members and talked to them about what they could do. And they all put on, we all had badges that were we had made them at the organization. They just had the name and the logo of the organization. And then they all had clipboards, gave them all clipboards, and the clipboards also had very official looking logos on the back. And he sent the 4 of these members to the police station, which seemed very dangerous to me. I was very concerned about this strategy. And he had the one who had English say, hi, there's a group of us here. We're from the Border Action Network, looking very official with their badges and their clipboards. And they said, and we're confused because a police officer took one of our cars and we have not been able to figure out why or how to get it back. And they got the car back on the spot. And it blew my mind because I was so worried about it till they came back. I thought, somebody's going to get deported, like what's going to happen? And so that was a really transformative moment in understanding for me of understanding the way that organizing can bring people together to create power where it didn't exist before, and also to solve their own problems, right? Like, so that, without elite assistance, I guess you would say. So anyway, I just want to launch with that story. That's what I was thinking of when I formulated this question. And why don't we have Ren, why don't you go first on this one?
That's a really powerful story, Zoe. I love it. I'm thinking about the challenge also of like other people's projections of authority and leadership. So when we're facilitating programming with groups, there's been times where I'm thinking of 2 times where actually, and I'll tell this because we're in a university, so fun layer, but 2 different professors, different times kind of challenging our staff, who are mixed status as well, challenging some of our staff on either like wanting to make changes in the itinerary that were like not possible to be made, or just something about the content, and really doing that like coaching of supporting my coworkers in having these conversations with trip leaders and knowing the times in which it's like they're like wanting to come to then me as the director of education, and the moments where it's like actually my work is just to redirect back to my staff's leadership, and if they like come to me and then I just agree with that person, with the staff's position and like direct back to them, or sort of strategically, intentionally, thoughtfully together being like, oh, we're going to lean into this, and I'm going to use that title to like move because people are projecting it, but that it's like done in relationship. So there's a certain way of yeah, like from your story, the sort of deciding like, okay, this is what's right in this moment, just noticing a lot of times of when we can decide together how we're going to move in a way that's like different than maybe is expected, and challenging those power dynamics that people are like coming into the space with, and like letting it be a transformative experience in that way as well. Um, I also have to say that I have a pet peeve with the word empowerment, and I know we use it all the time, and I still use it. That's the thing. But my challenge with it is that it means to give people power, and so much of the work we do is really actually about people feeling and knowing their inherent power that they already have. And so it's always about like reframing, looking for opportunities for yeah, not experiences that are like giving power, but kind of uncovering power people already have. And do we have a concise other word that captures that idea as well? Not really. Do I still sometimes say empowerment? Sure. But I just wanted to throw that in as like, it's a fundamental different orientation, I think, also to like where we find and experience power as well.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. I wonder if leadership development is the word that replaces empowerment. Maybe not, but that's one of the things I like about the concept of leadership development. And I think like, those are really powerful stories. And what really reminds me of is that doing the work of building movements, which is absolutely grounded in developing power and building power, rests on our belief in the power of people, right? And the power of everyday people, of ordinary people to lead, and to exert power collectively. Michael, how about, would you be willing to share a story or two with us about your experiences with leadership development?
Absolutely, yeah. And Ren, I think that's incredibly helpful. I don't think I've ever thought critically about empowerment in that way. We think about power all the time, but like, so in higher ed and manufacturing, I think there's like two juxtapositions of, but first starting with the context. So like in higher education, for instance, like with postdoctoral workers, right? So if you get your PhD as a grad student, you go on to become a postdoc, you're primarily doing research, right? You're doing research with a principal investigator who is a full researcher. This is now you're like 16 years into your professional training as an employee, right? And your postdoc, your time that you do with this principal investigator determines the rest of your academic career. If you're a postdoc and you're working with a PI, you need a letter of recommendation from that PI to then move on into anywhere else in your entire academic relationship, right? That relationship of power is so fundamentally unbalanced, right? The postdoc has to appease to the good graces of that PI. So we're looking at higher education, which has the highest rates of sexual harassment outside of the US military is higher education, right? So if that is the context under which you are organizing a union, right, the challenges there are tons of challenges. One of which is I don't want to be public in my support for the union out of fear that I'll ruin my relationship with my principal investigator, right? So if a staff organizer, and this is the context under which you are organizing a union, you fundamentally have to engage and directly take on that question, right? So there's a million different ways that you could try to work with somebody to push them through their individual relationship, but nothing that I'm ever going to say to a postdoc is going to reassure them that something bad is not going to happen to them with their relationship with their PI, right? The thing that we use to try to overcome this is fundamentally looking at that there's more power together in a union. The more people that come together, the harder it is to isolate and intimidate any one person, right? So I think really simply the success in that campaign was we organized the first ever private sector postdoctoral union at Columbia University in New York, where we won 68% of the vote. In the same instance, the same unit, it's estimated that postdoctoral researchers are anywhere between 40 and 50% of the postdocs in the US are immigrants. If you lose your position as a postdoc in the United States, most postdocs are on H-1B visas that are sponsored by universities. If you lose your working relationship with that university, you have 3 days to get out of the country before you become undocumented, right? So we have immigrant workers who are at risk of harassment and discrimination from their employer, whose ability to stay in the country and their entire career is resting on this relationship with this one person, right? We were still able to get 68% of the entire unit to vote union yes. Major success. Another thing I'd point to is towards the Volkswagen election in manufacturing, right? So the challenges and the context on that campaign, looking very specifically at in Tennessee, right? Tennessee is one of the most conservative states in the country, where we had to get workers across lines of difference to work together to build the union. Now, if you could imagine, these are like white folks, Black folks, Latino, Latinx folks, all working together to achieve one goal. Under the current political conditions in the United States, how easy do any of you think it might be to get people who view the world through different political lenses to come together to build an organization that fundamentally has to do with their income, with their livelihood, right? Those are real challenges that we come across all the time. And a good story that I always tell is we were doing a training to develop worker leaders, people from the plant who wanted to engage in building the union together. And one guy walks in with a Dixie Rebel Confederate flag hat on and sits down right next to a Black worker in the training. In my head, I'm like, I'm facilitating the meeting, deeply concerned about what's going to happen between these two workers. And when I started asking them about the issues that they had in the plant, like, what issues do you face at work? What issues do you think that the union can help you address in your work life? And both of them talked immediately about the treatment that they received from their management, from supervisors, the way that they were talked down to on the line, when they asked questions, like how they were responded to. And through the process of talking about the issues that they faced at work, they realized that they had more in common with one another than they did with their boss, right? That they had more solutions with one another than solutions up and down, right? Between the relationship between management and that worker. Those workers voted by 73% to form the first union at an OEM facility, which is an original equipment manufacturer, somewhere where they make one product from start to finish, since 1942. That's been the first auto plant to be organized since 1942. Under the current political conditions in the United States, that was just last year. So massive success and massive victory that was 100% the result of having a good leadership development program in both of those cases. So yeah, definitely a lot to focus on positive stuff for sure.
Incredible stories. Thank you so much, Michael. So it's 10, or well, here in Colorado, it's 10:45. And so I would love to take a few minutes to take 10 minutes to take questions from the audience for Ren and Michael. Anybody have any people want to turn on their cameras and ask a question?
I have a question, but first I have to share, mind blown, absolutely mind blown. My brain hurts because it's been stretching so far with these ideas. as someone who's unfamiliar with community organizing, Zoe and I talk about everything under the sun. We really don't talk about community organizing, though. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's about conflict and power struggle and those kinds of things. No, and now I understand a completely different. My perspective has shifted like monumentally. It's about relationship building, it's about listening, it's about, you just talked about common ground, and the more we can find that we have in common, the easier it's going to be to create that, not power struggle but balance of power, and find that level of equity where everyone brings value. And I'm so excited about this. So my question for you, after saying thank you so much for sharing all this, how do we learn more? If you could recommend a book or a website or a thought leader, who would you recommend, or what would you recommend? Where do we go from here if we want to continue to grow?
Ren, I know you got good ideas on this one. But for the labor movement, I'd say, if you're really interested and curious about the labor movement, the woman that I would recommend, who just recently passed away, but was a major, major thought leader for us, was Jane McAlevey. Jane McAlevey has wrote really good and also very accessible books. Like, she has a lifetime career organizer, who organized workers, came out of SEIU, did a lot of healthcare organizing, and she's written some really good books on just these questions about, like, how do we do this? What really practical. Thank you, Zoe. No shortcuts. As one of the most, I think, her really pivotal work in terms of like teaching 101 entry level, like, these are the concepts that we're talking about, and majority strategy approaches to building power. Absolutely. That's a great question. Thanks.
Yeah, I would add the book by Silky Shaw that just came out. She's the executive director of Detention Watch Network. So I'd also just recommend that organization. It's a national network, but they have locals and are really important, doing really important work around, yeah, like the abolition of detention centers and building community defense against deportation. And so her book is bridging between prison abolition and migrant justice. It's called Unbuild Walls: Why Migrant Justice Needs Prison Abolition, I think. So definitely recommend that. And on that thread, one of the people that has influenced me so much is Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and I have to just name her in this space. Not specifically migrant justice movement, but prison abolitionist. Oh, thanks, Zoe. There's Unbuild Walls. Exactly. And any articles, books, YouTube interviews with Ruth Wilson Gilmore, really just critical, like fundamental, frameworks around understanding racial capitalism and abolition. Also, abolition, geography, essays towards liberation. Zoe, thank you for your bookshelf today for the visuals. So those are a couple I would uplift, and also Mi Gente is another national organization, many national organizations, and then also just like local groups. Whoever's doing, deportation defense and rapid response work right now is where I'm directing a lot of my attention, and just really understanding, like, Michael, you spoke so well to the conditions that people are organizing under right now, and in this moment, understanding the violence that we're seeing of community members being kidnapped, and for people in the borderlands, we've known for a long time and seen, like, the US-Mexico border being the deadliest land-based crossing, and just the impact militarization has here. I think people are seeing nationally in a different way. So that's more like directing attention to what are the rapid response and deportation defense networks that are happening locally and across the country. And Borderlinks, we're an educational organization. So would love to invite people to come participate in delegations. You can bring groups and stay with us. We do in-person or online workshops, hosting retreats here, collaborating. We have internships, and So number of ways to collaborate, and on our website, some, not all of our community partners are listed there as well. So directing to other local organizations here in the Borderlands.
Those are great resources. Thank you. And I will definitely be on your website and share opportunities with our students, both our undergraduate and graduate students at the University of Olivet. Zoe, any suggestions from you?
Oh, sure. I've got a couple of books right here that I use in my classes for organizing. These are more sort of like how-to manuals. This is Tools for Radical Democracy. These are very affordable. And then the old classic here, Organizing for Social Change from the Midwest Academy. These are, there's worksheets, there's all sorts of concrete examples. You can go through, if you get a group of people together and just want to make a change in your community, these books will absolutely help you do that. Less big ideas than the books that the other books I was holding up that were mentioned by these two, but more of like how-to manuals.
Terrific, thank you. And I will definitely put those book lists together and get them out to all of our participants and get them on our websites.
Do you have any other questions? Anyone from the audience? Well, I've got another question. How can we in the audience get involved with supporting your organizations or the larger movements that your organizations contribute to? Ren, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I started speaking to this a little bit, but I can put my contact, I can share my contact information. It's just ren@borderlinks.org, REN at borderlinks.org. And also on our website, we have places you can find out about volunteering and internships and delegations, and reach out to us to schedule different workshops. And also, I think there's a sometimes something we face is people wanting to like know enough before they get involved or do it the right way. And I think that we're in a moment where a lot of the work that we do is like help people build skills so that they do join efforts and like do so effectively. And also we learn by doing and taking action. So I feel like a broken record sometimes, but I'm like, join an organization is my answer. Like, I used to think I was looking for the one that had all the exact ideals that lined up exactly with everything I believed in. And that's just actually not what it's about. It's about like being in it with people and struggling through and figuring it out together and like finding the places to start. So, yeah, join an organization, learn along the way as you're doing that.
Yeah, I love this. I think exactly what Ren said is correct. Like, on this call, like Ren and I came up together. We learned a lot of this stuff side by side. And like neither one of us, I think, got to the place we were without just doing it and trying to figure it out. It also, like, underneath the mentorship of Zoe, a huge part of this is learning from other people who have done stuff before, right? Like none of the stuff that we are doing is new. It's all been stuff that people have taught us. Like I never inherently knew any of this, right? Like these are all skills, concepts I learned from people who learn concepts and skills from other people. And so I'd say open to be mentored, right? Join an organization and, find the people in the room who have been there before you and ask them, what can I do to be helpful? Right. And like a lot of times that's really the question. And I bet they will have an answer for you, but find something you care about, join an organization, and with, y'all are in Michigan, the United Auto Workers, huge density in Michigan, like we just negotiated a contract, went on a huge strike, a lot of support. We had a ton, like I think the poll showed that 76% of the general public supported the auto workers in fighting for more support. Like companies had 40% wage or bonuses for executives, and they were proposing giving workers like a 10% wage increase. We fought for what the executives got, and a huge reason we got close to it was because of the support that we had. So follow the UAW on social media. They are always highlighting ways to get involved in struggles. It's also like, as soon as you graduate and you get a job, figure out which union is in your community and hit them up and organize your workplace. You know what I mean? Like, unions are growing. There's a huge moment right now where public support for unions is higher than it has been since like 1911. So, you know, the labor movement is really showing that there's a huge path forward for working across lines of difference with people you otherwise would probably not interact with, right? Like, workplace is one place where people don't choose who's around them. You know, the boss chooses. And it's a great place to build new kind of coalitions and new relationships.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I was going to throw in there that this is sort of circling back to Kelly's question about resources, is that one of the things that I've learned through the years about grassroots social movements that build power amongst, you know, workers and people living in communities, ordinary people, is that they're not reported in the media, right? I mean, the labor movement will sometimes appear in the news, right, when they have a huge win, right? But this work is going on all over the country and the world every single day, and there's just a lot of it, and we just never hear about it. And one of the sources that I've been going to for decades is just a news show called Democracy Now! That is where every single day they will be interviewing people who are organizers, you know, like Michael and Ren. And so if you want to kind of broadly educate yourself on what's going on, you know, they report internationally, but it's mostly about the United States. But that's a good starting resource for hearing from people who are doing this work. And then I think we're at time. Kelly, and can you give it back to you?
Thank you so much for all of those fantastic resources and the insights that you have shared. I'm going to go ahead and share a couple slides with some additional resources that we would like to offer to folks over the next couple months. Let me get there. There we go. One of the things that we do at the end of each one of these programs is we invite folks who are part of the University of Olivet community to join in the conversation. And so we have a leadership learning community on Canvas, our online learning portal, that if you want to jump into this conversation and ask questions or kind of reflect on what we've talked about, use this QR code or this link. Unfortunately, if you're not part of the community, you can't get in. And feel free to jump into this conversation. It'll be open for a month. And if you ask questions, we will forward them on to our panelists and see if they can give us some insights. And so we'll have kind of a delayed conversation. So definitely continue thinking about this, reflecting on the things that we've learned together today. And if you have suggestions of similar conversations you would like to have, definitely reach out to me, Kay Corey at the University of Olivet or uolivet.org. And so here are some other opportunities to fill your toolbox. We have our Master of Arts and our Master of Arts and Leadership, Master of Business Administration, or MBA programs that are starting in the fall. In just a few weeks, we've got new cohorts starting. One of the cohorts that would be, or one of the concentrations that would be particularly relevant to this work is creativity, innovation, and change. And how do we facilitate change? Nonprofit leadership and management, a lot of the work that's being done is being led by nonprofit organizations like RENS. And so those are things I would love to talk with you about if you're interested in building your skills from the academic side, as well as if you want to build an organization, even a nonprofit organization. Every organization that has employees and has a budget has the 5 functions of business, and an MBA can be powerful in helping to bring structure and consistency and legitimacy to the organization. So happy to talk about those. As I said, our leadership learning community for our UO folks And then also something that I am super excited about coming up in September is our Courageous Leadership Colloquium. The conversation that we had today is just an example of the kinds of conversations that we can learn from about how do we capture that energy of courage, and how do we really focus it in on creating positive change. There are going to be speakers everywhere, from firefighters from out west to community organizers in Kenya who are trying to protect the border from giant hotels stealing the land, to people are teaching about how to be a better public speaker and to have your voice be heard. So that is online, 2 days, 45-minute sessions. You can jump in and out all day, both days. And if you're live and in the community on Wednesday evening, we'll have some live on the ground leadership skill building sessions you can participate in as well. So you can use the QR code to register. You can email me, kcorey@uolivet.org, if you have questions, or if you have a topic that you would like to share during that colloquium that brings leadership and courage together in a way that helps to create positive change. So please feel free to jump into any of those experiences. And then finally, uh-oh, I missed one of my slides. We have our next Boldly Lead webinar. I will be leading this one. It is the week after classes start, and so it'll be at lunchtime on Monday. And it is, how do you leverage that great resource that we all have that's very limited? Time. We've got 24 hours. How do we use them to our best ability to influence others, to move together toward positive change and achieving goals? And so there's a strategy that I like to recommend called the time closet, and it looks at time as a resource and helps us to manage it well. So if you're interested in that, please register, and we will see you there. As always, we will share the recordings of our events online. We'll send them out to folks who have registered as well, and then we will have them available for you in the future. So with that, I want to thank our panelists, Ren, Michael, Zoe. Thank you for helping us see organizing as leadership and understand how important leadership is to bringing people together to create change. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your passion, and your investment in helping people find a place to make a difference in their organizations. It's been awesome to get to know you and learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Such a
you,
pleasure.
Kelly.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.